Hey everybody, what is going on? Maxx here with another Master Duel video for you guys today, much like in the last video where we took a look at our Season 7 list for Sword Soul Tenki. Now today we're going to be taking a look at our Season 7 list for Tri-Brigade Zoodiac, which at this current time is actually looking pretty similar to our list we used last season. Much in the same way, and I touched upon this in the Sword Soul Tenki profile from yesterday as well. Similarly to that deck, I didn't really feel the need to change too many things about this current build because the meta hasn't really shifted too much here in terms of what the matchups are like and what the current top decks that are being used in terms of both power level and popularity are like. Right, we're still seeing Sword Soul and Sword Soul Tenki on top above Tri-Zoo. The gap has definitely widened, definitely in the period of time since we last looked at like a metagame analysis, like towards the beginning of season 6, but well, I guess we looked at the end of season 6, you know what I mean though. The gap has definitely widened a bit, but that's mostly coming from, I think, Sword Soul's usage over Tri-Zoo. I still would consider Tri-Zoo to be a tier 1 deck. Now it is definitely going to be a lower tier 1 deck than Sword Soul Tenki, but I do still consider it to be tier 1. Again, though, I might be a little bit biased because I do really like Tri-Zoo. Was my first really competitive, Master Duel deck, and of course, the first deck profile was the one that kind of got people to pay attention to my channel. So naturally, I'm going to be a little bit more inclined towards, just playing Tri-Zoo in general. But definitely still a very solid deck for the format. Even if you would consider it upper tier 2, that's definitely still very competitive and very easy to hit Diamond 1 with. While it does tend to struggle a little bit against Sword Soul Tenki, Tri-Zoo still has really solid matchups against the rest of the meta, able to use its spot removal and disruption in order to kind of pick apart the opponent's board. It's almost like a combo control deck in that regard, and that we do use extensive combos in order to get to our plays that have a lot of really good end results. But rather than putting a bunch of big monsters on board and or monsters that like negate just by being on the board, we're using more disruptive effects like the banish from Shureg here, or like the pop from DPE, or just our myriad of hand traps as well. Another strength of Tri-Zoo, of course, being that a lot of the combos are like even one card in the case of Fraktall. That card by itself generates plays, or just a bunch of real like 2-card simple combos. That leaves a lot of room for flexibility in the deck as far as options to run for like hand traps and disruption, like I mentioned earlier. We're playing some like kind of niche stuff. Like the Ghost Spell. We're still playing the Ghost Spell. I've actually considered taking this out for a 3rd Imperm, and I might end up doing that once I actually start playing here in Season 7. Just like the last video, it is the end of Season 6 at the time that I'm recording this, and the gameplay that you will be watching is from the end of Season 6 as well, but being the same build and generally the same meta, these examples are still going to be applicable moving forward here into Season 7, at least for the beginning. Who knows when we're going to get the Adventure and Flow packs. I always, knowing my luck, they're going to get announced like the day after I record this, because that just seems how it always goes with me. I'll like record videos ahead of time, assuming the meta is going to be a certain way, and then all of a sudden a new pack gets announced out of nowhere, and then it completely shakes up the meta. At least that happened with Refined Blade, so I wouldn't be surprised if it happened with Flows and Adventures too, but if it does, it does. I definitely won't complain. We will adapt as always, but yeah, in any case, like I said, this build I haven't really felt the need to change up too much. If Sword Soul Tenki do prove to be like overwhelmingly dominant in the meta, I could see myself dropping this Ghost Spell for a 3rd Imperm, or possibly a Veiler as a solid target for Crossout Designator, because this deck does kind of get hurt by Veiler and Imperm. So just having the flexible option to be able to hit a Veiler with a Crossout would be nice. Droplets I've also kind of considered taking out of the deck, but I still think they're really solid. Just disruption, they're good for breaking boards, like Sword Soul Tenki boards. You can use Droplet to break like Chi Shao plus Baron, and maybe even, well, Protoss doesn't really matter as much. If they Protoss Call Dark, that actually really hurts us, because that means we can't access Coda Shureg, which are definitely like, our main boss monsters. Can't DPE either, so yeah, Protoss definitely hurts us a lot by calling Dark. That's one of the reasons that deck actually has a pretty good matchup against Tri-Zoo. That and also just being able to play well through Tri-Zoo's disruptions. If you know you're playing against Sword Soul Tenki, be it you recognize an opponent's name or you check their deck and it's like 45, 44, like a little bit above 40 cards, it's probably Sword Soul Tenki. If you know you're playing against them, it can actually be often better to go into Appaloosa turn 1 than DPE. That's another reason why, or one of the main reasons rather, why I put Appaloosa back in the deck over Racefulgur in the first place at your guys' suggestion, is because, like I mentioned, just being able to play around Sword Soul is better. Sword Soul has a much harder time playing through the multiple monster effect negates than the singular DPE disruption. Now, sometimes that singular DPE disruption is enough in order to stop your opponent from, making any further plays, but oftentimes it won't be, so that's where the Appaloosa more often comes in. I am kind of missing Racefulgur in the extra deck. God, if only I could have 16. Even just 16, I would just throw Racefulgur in, but of course we are limited to 15. And I don't know, I really only, I mean, the Appaloosa really is the flex spot. I do consider 2 Shurag to still be pretty needed. There are plenty of games where you end up going into both. Everything else is definitely needed. Maybe the Double Dragon Lords is like the only other flex spot, but would definitely rather have this than the Racefulgur for sure. This card is such a good option in order to just have a easy link to just banish 2 monsters, have a disruptive option in order to be able to send your opponent's stuff back to the hand. And also being able to get rid of like your own face of Tenki or maybe a card in hand can actually be really relevant in terms of just like, there have been, I feel like there's a time where maybe it came up, or maybe I just had a different play instead, but like, sending a card from the hand to the graveyard in order to be able to use Celestial's effect because you have no cards in hand to draw 2 more cards. So just a lot of little niche scenarios that Double Dragon Lords can come up quite a bit. So definitely like having this, but if you're wondering what the flex spots the extra are, I would consider that to be Appaloosa and Double Dragon Lords. But at the same time, I consider Appaloosa and Double Dragon Lords to probably be the best 2 uses of those spots at this current time for what that's worth. So, like I said, as far as like niche hand trap option or disruption options for playing Ghost Belle, Lightning Storm is another card I've kind of considered dropping for a 3rd Imperm, but I've liked having a copy in here pretty much since the start. I used to play 2 actually in addition to Feathered Esther if I recall correctly, which is definitely too much, but just having the 1 copy is still really nice going second option, especially the flexibility that it provides. Of course, we're still using DPE as well, although I will acknowledge, I think I've said before that, like, oh, if you're not using DPE, why are you playing Tri-Zoo? Or something, maybe not quite that blunt, but I've made a similar statement to that in the past, and I'm not sure that I necessarily stand by it anymore, especially playing during Season 6 while laddering. I noticed quite a few of the Tri-Zoo decks I was playing against were not using DPE, and as a result, we're actually able to produce some stronger boards against, particularly when I was playing against Sword Soul Tenki. Again, Sword Soul Tenki doesn't really get disrupted by DPE too much, but stuff like Appaloosa definitely matters a lot more, like Appaloosa plus Double Dragon Lords plus Revolt that, set up that we used to do in the old build, which you could technically still do in this build, but you tend not to just because going into DPE against most decks is better. Again, that being another reason why Sword Soul Tenki tends to have a good matchup against this deck is that they're not as disrupted by DPE as other decks, and most Sword Soul, or most Tri-Zoo decks, myself included, are running the DPE package. I do think it is still probably right to run the DPE package, but if the meta is Sword Soul heavy enough, I could see going back to the I don't want to call it pure Tri-Zoo because it's still mixing Tri-Brigade Zoodiac, but I could see cutting the DPE package again to not only include more room in the extra deck to set up for Appaloosa plus Double Dragon Lords plus Revolt more easily, but then you can also use those extra main deck slots to put in some extra tech against Sword Soul specifically. But again, Sword Soul would have to be like probably... For me to want to do that, I'd say Sword Soul would probably have to be at least 66% or 2/3 of my matchups, at the very least. And I don't think the format's going to be quite that dominated by Sword Souls coming up here in Season 7. It could be the case. I wouldn't be too shocked if it happened, but that would still be like a lot of Sword Soul decks, so... Alright, let's go ahead and break this list down. Oops, sorry, I bumped the desk there. Let's go ahead and break this list down card by card, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at some replays. We've got 3 Tri-Brigade Nervall, 3 Maxx, 2 Tri-Brigade Kerass, 3 Tri-Brigade Kitt, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 1 Ghost Belle and Haunted Mansion, 1 Destiny Hero Celestial, 1 Zoodiac Whiptail, 1 Zoodiac Thoroughblade, 1 Zoodiac Ramram, 2 Tri-Brigade Fraktall, 1 Destiny Hero Dasher, 1 Nibiru the Primal Being, 1 Harpie's Feather Duster, 2 Fusion Destiny, 1 Lightning Storm, 3 Fire Formation Tenki, 2 Call by the Grave, 2 Crossout Designator, 2 Forbidden Droplet, 2 Infinite Impermanence, and 2 Tri-Brigade Revolt for the main deck. Down here in the extra deck, we've got 1 Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, 1 Zoodiac Trident, 1 Zoodiac Borbo, 1 Zoodiac Chakanine, 1 Divine Arsenal Zeus Sky Thunder, 1 Salmon Grey Almirage, 1 Predaplant Vert Anaconda, 1 Ancient Warriors Oath Double Dragon Lords, 1 Tri-Brigade Farigite the Baron Blossom, 1 Tri-Brigade Ramram the Rampage Rampager, 1 Tri-Brigade Rugal the Silver Sheller, 1 Appaloosa Bow of the Goddess, 1 Access Code Talker, and then finally 2 Tri-Brigade Shureg the Ominous Omen. Okay, I think I've said my piece about pretty much every aspect of this deck that I wanted to cover. I guess for the Zoodiac monsters, I could point out that I'm still using Whiptail over Kerass, as whenever I play, again, when I used Kerass in the past, it just never came up. Now, I guess if we do find ourselves in that super heavy Sword Soul format hypothetical that I mentioned, then yeah, I would probably drop Whiptail for Kerass, as negating the Chi Shao would be a lot more relevant in a format like that. But in a more generalized format, especially one where Eldritch is seeing a fair bit of play, as we're seeing right now, I like the Whiptail Banish effect. It comes up, for me, it's come up a lot more than the Kerass has. Even the time that I've replaced Kerass with Whiptail, not counting all the previous experience with Whiptail, I still have the effects come up definitely more often than Kerass ever did. So, okay, just looking at the list here, yeah, I don't see any other points I need to necessarily dwell on. Yeah, I think we are good to just go ahead and jump into some gameplay. So let's go ahead and take a look at those example games. Okay, so this first game is actually going to be a bit of a meme example, or rather, not a meme example. I'm playing it some meme deck, but I'm using it as an example to show off some good turn 1 combos. Our opponent's playing an entire life gain deck, I imagine, for like the secret mission, because I looked at their list and they didn't really have a win con, it was all just life gain stuff. So we're going to take the first turn here. I see we open Fraktall plus Tenki, so if you open both of them like this, then you definitely want to activate Tenki first, and try to bait your opponent into ashing that. It's definitely better for them to ash the Tenki and not the Fraktall. Now, if they don't ash the Tenki and you still have the Fraktall in hand, I definitely think it's better to add a Zoodiac monster than a second Fraktall, because then if you can only use 1 Fraktall per turn anyway, and then if your Fraktall gets negated by an ash, if they held the ash, then you at least have backup plays in the form of a Zoodiac monster into like a Trident or something. Again, if you just added a second Fraktall, then you wouldn't have any backup plays at all. Or you could even hypothetically just hold the Zoodiac, not play it at all turn 1, and then wait to play it after your opponent's first turn, and then go into a Zeus. If you've got other disruption or hand traps, like we have Droplet and Nash here, that's definitely an option we could do. But yeah, like I said, we're going to lead with the Tenki here, see if that resolves. It does. So like I mentioned, we're going to add a Zoodiac, even though I don't have any particular plans for it at this time. Now I'm going to activate Fraktall. Looks like that's going to end up resolving as well. That's really nice. I mean, Kitt and Nervall, that's a pretty typical line for the Tri-Brigades, Fraktall, send Kitt, send Nervall, load up your graveyard. Adding another Kitt. Don't want to add the other Fraktall because it's the only other copy in our deck. So we'll use Kitt, banish Shu to go into the Bearbrum. Now, I could have set up a DPE here if I was willing to discard 2 cards in order to use the Bearbrum effect, but a couple of reasons I didn't. One is that, I would have had to ultimately toss pretty much the whole rest of my hand, because I can't discard Celestial, because if it's in the graveyard, then I can't use, Fusion Destiny off Vert Anaconda, so definitely can't discard that. And then, the other reasons are that I like all these other cards in hand, right? I like this Ash and this Droplet as Disruption. I like this Zoodiac as a backup plan. And again, like I just mentioned, we can't discard the Celestial and then still fuse and get the combo off. So that being the case, I decided it's not really worth it to discard the 2 with Bearbrum. That is something that you have to think about a lot more than you did in the past, right? Because we're seeing this DPE line become a bit more accessible now. It's going to make that option, or not become more accessible, but the DPE line adds a lot more variety and accessibility to our turn 1 plays, whereas before we would always have to Rugal into a Revolt like we're going to do now, and then set it up. Now we can actually more consider during turn 1, is it actually worth it to activate Bearbrum's effect? Before DPE, no, it was pretty much never worth it at all, but now, actually something worth considering. In any case, though, like I mentioned, that we're not going to do that in this case because we like the cards in our hand. We can also put back this Celestial with the Revolt if we don't discard all these other cards. So that's pretty nice too. Otherwise, we would have, again, had to discard 2 of them and then put the other one back for the Revolt, and then we would have fused the Celestial from hand, and we wouldn't have really gained anything there. So, yeah, I pretty much knew at this point my opponent was playing. I thought there's, like, maybe a chance at some weird FTK that involves your life points being so much higher than your opponent's or something, but now, like I mentioned, I'm pretty sure my opponent's just doing this for the mission there, the secret mission to gain life points, so... Now we get to show what a good example of a follow-up is, right? We're going to use the Revolt to banish. I think the face-down spell trap here is definitely more of a threat than the monster. Well, it definitely is, because we know it's a Nibble Mamaga, but using Revolt during the end phase is really good like this. If your opponent didn't use anything, you know, summon anything that you wanted to disrupt, like a combo or something. It's good to pick off back rows, especially, because back rows tend to, not always, but tend to be a bigger threat than face-down monsters. Unless your opponent's playing like a niche stun deck or something, then it can definitely right to just hit the face-down monster, because it could be like a Fossil line or something. I think we'll actually see an example of that in a later game. The trap they banished, by the way, was Altar for Tribute, which is just a pretty simple life gain card. Yep, so here we'll go ahead and summon the Kerass, and we're actually going to be able to OTK our opponent even though they have 10,400 life points and a face-down monster on the board. Obviously the monster is actually not that hard to get rid of, we'll just use Shurig's effect. Then I'll use Ferrigite to summon the Ramram. I'm not going to go into a Zoodiac line to set up a Zeus or anything though. I'll just link it away with the Link 3 Rugal in order to go into Access Code Talker. And that's going to be 5,300 plus 3,000 plus 28, I believe is 10,800. 4,000, or 400 more than we need actually for lethal... Or no, it looks like it was more like 700. I did the math. Not very good at math, I'll be the first to admit that. But yeah, even though it was against a meme deck, this still showed off a really good example of just how powerful the one-card combo or Fraktall by itself can be. Also like to show this as an example of how the follow-up play can be so devastating that we can still OTK an opponent that's got more than 8,000 life points. And we didn't even have to use the access code effect. Never mind the fact that we could have popped multiple cards potentially in order to clear the way for an OTK. So just goes to show like a good example of the power of Tri-Zoo can bring. So all right, let's go ahead and take a look at the next game now. All right, so this game is definitely going to be more of a back and forth. This is going to be against Sword Souls, which is definitely, you know, a good example to show of, you know, playing against one of the tougher, or rather the toughest, probably the toughest matchup for us. Well, no, I'm actually, the zombie world, the matchup can be a little bit more devastating, but just depends if they actually resolve the zombie world or not. But we can take the first turn. We only have the, you know, Kitt line. We do have Fusion Destiny alongside it, so it's actually still going to be pretty good here, except for the fact that our opponent's going to Asher Kitt, but we've got the call by, so... It's funny, I always miss the call by in my hand whenever that happens. It's like a running trend for me when, you know, going over these replays, but yeah, we definitely want to call by this Ash here, because, you know, even though the Kitt's not going to be able to summon like a Kerass or anything, I still want to get the Search to set up the Fraktall in hand. And then, like I said, we're just going to go straight into Fusion Destiny because we don't have any further plays with the Tri-Brigades. I'll just go ahead and summon good old DPE here. So yeah, we don't get to set up a Revolt, but we still get to at least have this set up. Now, I know I said during the profile that DPE by itself doesn't really threaten Sword Soul too much. I would say that's more like in typical cases that's true, but there are still some scenarios where DPE by itself can kind of mess up Sword Souls, and we're going to actually see examples of that during this game. We do have the Maxx, but unfortunately our opponent is packing a Crossout Designator to go ahead and deal with that, so won't be getting extensive draws and or stopping their plays that way. We would have liked the draws especially, but opponent's going to activate Moye's effect and reveal an Adhara. Revealing the Adhara is definitely going to make me more inclined to activate DPE. I would have done it either way here, but we definitely want to pop specifically Moye and not the Sword Soul token. This is actually something that's very important to know, not just for Tri-Zoo, but anybody playing against Sword Soul. If you have the option to disrupt their plays by popping one card, it's typically better to leave the token out. And you might think, well, it's a vanilla though, doesn't that enable all their Tenki stuff? It does, but here's the thing. In order to make their plays, Tenkis typically need to link away, and the Sword Soul, while the token is out, you can only Synchro Summon. That effect lingers even after the Moye leaves the board. So that's why it's good to leave the Sword Soul token, because yeah, they can special that Adhara from their hand, but they can't link away the token at Adhara because they can only Synchro Summon while the token is in play. So it definitely pays to keep that in mind. Opponent's going to try to special their Adhara here, but yeah, they're not going to get very far. And then they end up discarding the Blackout, which is funny because my opponent actually could have had a much better setup against me if they had discarded Adhara. and then summon the Long Yuan, and then got into a Cheng Ying and set up the Blackout. I don't know. Well, I do have the Lightning Storm, so I could have come back with that potentially, but it would have been more difficult for me to come back in that kind of a scenario. So, actually, now that I think about it, no, it wouldn't have, because I'm not even going to end up using this Lightning Storm really to answer my opponent's board here. So I could have just Lightning Stormed the face down Blackout. So it actually really wouldn't have made a difference at all now that I think about it. Well, I would have had to have DPE'd during main phase 1 first. Probably would have popped the Adhara. Not trying to get rid of the Cheng Ying, obviously, because he just activated its effect. Then I would have Lightning Stormed the back row. Okay. I don't know. That's a whole hypothetical line that I'm going into, but I'm just trying to figure out like what that line would have looked like had the game played out a little bit differently. I do find it helpful to try to figure that out sometimes. I mean, there are of course times where it's like, okay, the game is, you just have to focus on the game that's in front of you. But that said, there is some merit to figuring out how you would have played out an alternative line. You know, that can definitely help you with games in the future. So I wouldn't spend too much time in the moment dwelling on it, but if you're reflecting back by watching replays, it can definitely be helpful to speculate on that. So as you can see, we're still able to have a decent amount of plays here with the Kerass into the Farajit, and that lets us summon the Ramram to set up a Zoodiac setup. I should have just sacked the token with the Boarbow. Don't know why I didn't do that here. I guess we only missed out on 800 points of damage, but yeah, it's not that big of a deal. And we actually get to set up multiple things here. So I'm going to link away into the Bear Brum, and then now I can use the Boarbow to go into Zeus, and then I'm going to link the Bear Brum and the Appaloosa into an Farajit into an Appaloosa, and the Bear Brum will let me search a Revolt. So I'll have 2 material Appaloosa, Zeus, and Revolt all set up, which is a little bit overkill. You don't need all that. And you could even make an argument that you shouldn't set the Revolt in addition to the Appaloosa plus Zeus. Appaloosa plus Zeus should probably be enough to answer whatever your opponent has, and if you end up needing to use Zeus before you activate the Revolt, then you just, you know, wasted your own Revolt for no reason. But by the same token, you could also make an argument that you can just Revolt before you need to Zeus, which is kind of what I thought here, which is what made me inclined to get this full setup here. Plus, I mean, our opponent's in top deck mode. Like, we're just so far ahead in advantage. It shouldn't really matter too much here. There are times when it might, but I don't think so in this scenario. So, like I said, opponent's in top deck mode. I believe they top of Vishuddha here, which in any other circumstance, if I didn't have Appaloosa out, might actually be a pretty decent top deck. They could special Vishuddha, go into Monk. I'd probably have to flip up Revolt in response to the Monk being summoned. So I guess that still would have probably been lethal. But we could just use Appaloosa to negate the Vishuddha and not even get that far, right? Pretty easily. We'll Revolt during the end phase. I don't plan, obviously, on banishing anything. I'll just go ahead and summon the Shurig just to do it now during the opponent's end phase. And we'll get the Search and the Send. Again, that's not really going to end up mattering too much here. We've already got this game pretty much on lockdown from this point forward. Actually, we know we have it on lockdown because we know their card hand is a Vishuddha. We know nothing in their graveyard is going to be relevant. Same for their Banish. They're just wide open. We'll just flip this Zeus to attack mode and smack our opponent for game. So yep, easy. GG easy against Sword Souls. Opponent did misplay a little bit, but as I was musing there, I don't think, even if they had played correctly, I think I still could have played around that Blackout and would have, you know, I would have in pretty much any scenario tried to get rid of the back rows before going into my place. So yeah, cool. That does it for that game. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Okay, this game is going to be against Exo Sisters, which I'm seeing a little bit more of here and there as you know, the time since the new pack came out has progressed. I still don't really have a desire to play them quite yet myself. I know they do get a little bit better in future, like way in the future formats on the OCG where they're more graveyard-based decks, but look at this hand here. You know, this is a pretty mediocre hand. I do have a Ghost Spell and a Nibiru for my opponent's turn, but since it's Exo Sisters, I think they're probably not gonna summon enough for me to Nibiru here. So really am baking on this top deck to get some good plays going here. Kerass can't do anything by itself. That's why we only play 2 Kerass, by the way, instead of 3, is that Kerass doesn't do anything by itself, so definitely don't need that many copies. And there's looks like they're gonna set up the Exo Sister ward here, which if I recall correctly lets you like summon potentially multiple, summon multiple monsters there with the Vadis. Did I call it something completely different? I think I did. I think I said Varus. It's Vadis. Is it Varus, a character from Vrains? If I remember right. I don't know. I actually haven't seen that anime. That and Sevens are the ones I haven't seen yet. So again, we managed to... Did we top deck a Fraktall? No, we top deck a Nervall. Oh, that's right. So then, yeah, we're able to do the Kerass and Nervall line. If you're curious about that line, you can check out my description. There is a combo guide listed there. If you want more in-depth discussion on exactly how these lines are working, I'm trying to do my best to explain it as I'm, doing the replay as well. But that combo guide is definitely, if you're looking specifically for how the combos work, is definitely where you're going to want to go. So, oh wow, I forgot the opponent conceded that early, but that definitely wasn't going to be game that turn. It might have been, actually. I feel like I maybe could have played that in a way that could have been game that turn, but I don't think it would have been. I definitely would have used Shurg if they hadn't responded with the face down Vetus to just go ahead and banish it, and then Bearborn would have added the Revolt. I'm just thinking, like, I could have linked away... Did I still have Farajit in the extra? I think I did. I could have linked away Shurg and the Fraktall into Farajit, search with Shurg, summon. I don't think that would have been lethal, though. Well, actually, it might have. No, I would have only been able to summon Tri-Brigade, so I couldn't summon Access Code because I would have used Bearbrim's effect by that point. So, no, it wouldn't have been lethal. Okay. Again, just going to these hypothetical lines, trying to figure out, like, even though, you might be like, oh, well, the game is over. Your opponent conceded. There's no point thinking about it. There is still merit to trying to figure out what the optimal line would have been from there, again, for future potential games. But I think that's enough speculation on this game. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. So this game is going to be against a Guru, Subterror Guru kind of stun deck. And let's see how we open here. Looks like we do get to take the first turn. That's always nice. That's an alright opening hand. I mean, it's fine enough. We've got Tenki, we've got Fraktall, we've got Nervall, and the Ash for backup. The Celestial's obviously a little meh, as always, being one of our two Garnets. But, what can you do? So we'll lead with the Tenki, like I mentioned before, adding the Zoodiac because we didn't have one already. Opponent never responds for it, so we'll just go ahead and then discard Fraktall and start to go into that line. We actually can go into a slightly different line here because we've got the other Zoodiac monster in our hand. We can go into the Farajit instead of the Bearbrim to some of the others, not Zoodiac, the other Tri-Brigade monster, in this case being Nervall. And then we can link away the Farajit and the Kitt into the Anaconda. If you're gonna set up Revolt plus DPE, you gotta do it like this, right? So we summon the Bearbrim, not using the Bearbrim as a material to make Anaconda, because then you can only summon Tri-Brigades for the rest of the turn, if I can get my words out there. And then you'll want to use DPE to pop the Bearbrim with its own effect. And the reason I also pop the Nervall here is to free up 4 zones for my Revolt. That way I would be able to summon 4 monsters to link away into a Shurg. That's the other thing you want to do in setting up this opening play here. So opponents can lead with Extravagance, banishing 6. I know right away that means they're probably like a stun deck. There's some kind of a stun deck or a control deck. I'll go ahead and Ash it because obviously the card advantage is important to, well, pretty much any deck, but especially more control type decks. Opponent Duality is revealing Ash Duality and C. I'm actually pretty okay with this reveal. They definitely could have revealed much scarier stuff, like this Lord of the Heavenly Prison, which they go ahead and reveal here. So I'm pretty sure it's not Eldritch because they played Duality, and Eldritch does not really ever play Duality because they do obviously rely on special summoning their own Golden Lord a fair bit. So given that being the case, I'm sorry, I bumped the bike there. Given that being the case, I'm gonna go ahead and use my Revolt for a Shurg, obviously, and then I'm gonna Shurg banishing the face-down monster as opposed to one of the face-down spell or trap cards, because again, I don't know what kind of a control / stun deck this is. It could be some kind of a flip. It could be like I don't know. For some reason, Morphing Jar number 2 was the card that came to mind, although I think that card is actually banned nowadays. But just some kind of like random flip effect or some monster that activates when destroyed. I think it's basically just a safe call here. Now it ends up just being a spare Fiendus, which doesn't do anything, I don't think. Yeah, no, it doesn't do anything, except obviously it's an Omni-Negate hand trap where you have a Subterror monster. That's obviously really good, but I mean, while set as a face-down monster, no, it doesn't really do anything. So, who's gonna Maxi right at the start of our turn, trying to cop a draw off of our DPE coming back. I'll go ahead and Ash that to make sure that doesn't happen. And now we get to summon DPE back. So, we currently have 6,000 points of damage on the board. We'll normal summon the Fraktall. That's going to get us our last 2,000. And then I think their opponent just didn't have anything relevant to activate because they go ahead and concede there. If they had flipped up a trap card, obviously our response would depend on what the trap card was. I think I was probably planning on activating Fraktall's effect anyway, even though I had exactly 8,000 damage on board. Normally it is better just to go for lethal, but in that scenario where our opponent does have back rows, it could be a variant of Mirror Force. It's not uncommon to see control/stun decks playing those. So I think it would have been better to try to go for more plays and maybe either get rid of or play around their back row. Plus, you never know, they could have just flipped up a random trap during the battle phase to just special summon the Lord of the Heavenly Prison. So I kind of wanted to make sure that I had an out to that as well. My plan was to kind of maneuver into access code talker. I think it should have been possible in that scenario, but in any case, we've got one more game to take a look at. Let's go ahead and get right into it. And the last game we're going to take a look at here is against a 60-card IDS deck, IDS being Invoked Dogmatica Shaddoll. Although I don't think it was playing... I don't know, these 60-card decks, I always say IDS, but I rarely ever see them play Dogmatica cards nowadays. Maybe they're just not drawing them, or maybe that engine just isn't as powerful anymore. Who knows? But opponent takes the first turn here, and unfortunately we don't have any hand traps. I mean, it's Alistair, so they probably would have had the Invocation in their hand anyway, but so it goes. You know how it is with Invoked decks. They always open the Meltdown and the Alistair and the Invocation just to make your hand traps all the more useless and, you know, feel bad, I guess. So, the Alistair, yeah, gets linked away for the Magistus Moon Maiden, which is a light, so they can go into Macabre, wheeling the Alistair back for another monster to negate with effects. But fortunately, that's all our opponent is able to do here. So, really lucky they weren't able to also get a window set up. We do top deck the Imperm, which is a really good top deck. Even if they had, if they had set a card here, right? I think I would have tried to bait out the Macabre effect and hold the Imperm to potentially use against a window later. But given again that they didn't set anything, and I'm fairly confident they're not going to make a window from just cards in their hand, I'm pretty sure IDS is not capable of doing that. I'll just go ahead and use the Imperm to negate the Macabre, and somehow the opponent has a completely dead hand that does not have any hand traps either. Well, I say somehow, but it's a 60-card deck. I feel like that's not going to be too terribly uncommon. I know the point is to be playing 60 cards, but that does still end up making your deck inherently a little bit less consistent than others. So I imagine that's probably what had to have happened here. Still just unlucky for the opponent to open no hand traps or no way to fuse. Or no grass. Like, that's like the perfect storm for my opponent to not be able to do well. But I want to show this game off because it's going to show an OTK line. As you can see, we went into Access Code and Bearbrum. Now we're able to use Bearbrum's effect to get rid of the last two cards in our hand to then put more than enough damage on the board to OTK the opponent. One of the reasons that Tri-Zoo is so good, not only acting as a more controlling deck with its disruption, but we still have the combo aspect where we're able to pretty easily generate an OTK kind of out of nowhere like that. So, alright, that's all the footage we've got. Let's go and take one last look at the build for the outro. Okay, everybody, so that's going to just about do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed coming back to some more Tri-Zoo. I know I always do. And like I said, I do plan on playing this deck a little bit more as I ladder here. I'll mix it in with Sword Soul and still maybe Virtual World. I'm kind of considering it. I'm kind of considering maybe my plan is going to be like in Platinum. I'll just play like Virtual World and Tri-Zoo, and then once we get to Diamond, then we'll go full sweat tryhard mode and then move into Sword Soul Tenki. But who knows? Maybe I'll run into enough trouble early enough in Platinum to like go into Sword Soul then, and then I don't know, we'll figure it out. We always do. Definitely do plan on laddering with some amount of Tri-Zoo though, for sure, as like I said, I think this deck is still really solid for laddering, even though it has a tougher matchup against Sword Soul. As we saw, the matchup is not nearly unwinnable, it's just a little hard, that's all, and still has solid matchups against pretty much the rest of the format. So once again, yep, thank you for watching all the way to the very end like this. That is one of the best ways to support the channel. Another great way to support the channel, if you feel so inclined, is by subscribing. Also lets you get notified of when my videos go out, which happens every day, so you have that to look forward to when you subscribe. Is daily Master Duel videos. I also really like seeing comments from you guys. If you have any suggestions for the build, do let me know. If you are experimenting with any tech options in this particular meta that you find is working very well, I would love to hear about those, as you guys in the comments have very much in the past often influenced the way I play and build for the better. I've said it a million times and I'll always say it. I have one of the best comment sections on YouTube, and I truly mean that. Not just because it's my own, but just from all that I've seen in general. But okay, that is going to do it for this video. Without further ado, this is Xlex signing out. Hope you guys have a fantastic day.